follow my story until the end and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? The morning I finally changed, everything started the same way most of my mornings do. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my robe, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm because I'd forgotten about it again. The light was coming through the window over the sink, that thin, pale kind of October light that doesn't really warm anything, just remind you that winter is on its way. I had a notepad in front of me. I'd been writing down numbers. I do that sometimes. I sit down with my coffee and I write down numbers. I count balances. What's due when, what I spent last month on groceries. My late husband used to tease me about it. He'd say, Audrey, you are the only woman I know who does household finances like she's running a small corporation. I'd tell him someone had to. He'd laugh. I miss that laugh more than I can say. He passed 6 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden, in the driveway of this very house. One minute he was there, and then he wasn't, and I've been figuring out the rest of life on my own ever since. I was 61 when it happened. I'm 67 now. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a naive woman. I am not someone who has floated through life letting other people make decisions for me. I worked for 31 years as an office manager for a medical practice here in Ohio. I handled payroll, vendor contracts, insurance billing. I knew how money worked. I knew how people worked. I retired with a 401k that I had carefully managed for decades, a paid-off house, and just over $118,000 in a savings account I thought of as my security blanket. My don't ever touch this money. My sleep at night money. So how did I end up sitting at that kitchen table in October, staring at a number that was $47,000 smaller than it should have been? I'm going to tell you exactly how. My son. I'll call him my son, because that's what he is. That's the only title that matters here. Is 36 years old. He's a project manager for a logistics company. He works from home 3 days a week, drives a nice car, lives in a house about 20 minutes from mine that he bought 4 years ago with his wife. His wife. That's where I need to start. He met her at a work conference in Chicago 5 years ago. She was in sales. She is charming in the way that certain people are charming, the kind of charm that you feel immediately, that makes you feel seen and special, and that you only later realize was being deployed rather than felt. Her name is Nadia. She has a wide smile, and she laughs at everything. And when she first came to my house for dinner, she complimented every single thing. The tablecloth, the pot roast, the way I'd arranged the hydrangeas on the counter. I thought, well, my son has good taste. They got married 2.5 years ago. I contributed $8,000 toward the wedding. That was my choice, my gift, freely given. I want to be clear about that, because what came after was not freely given, and it matters to me that you understand the difference. The first time they asked me for money was 3 months after the wedding. My son called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. We usually talked on Sundays. He said they'd had an unexpected expense, something with the HVAC system in the house, and they were a little short that month because they'd also just paid for their honeymoon credit card balance. Could I lend them $1,500? He'd pay me back by the end of the month. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my son. The HVAC story made sense. I transferred the money that evening. He did not pay me back by the end of the month. When I mentioned it gently about 6 weeks later, he said things were still a little tight. He was sorry, he'd get it to me soon. I said, okay. I said, take your time. I should have said no, but I didn't know that yet. The requests kept coming, and they kept having reasons. There was a car repair. There was a medical bill. Nadia had a procedure, something with her knee, and their deductible was high. There was a situation where my son said a client hadn't paid on time, and his own paycheck was delayed. Each time the amount was a little larger. Each time the timeline for repayment stretched a little further. And each time I said yes because he was my son, and because the stories were plausible, and because I had the money, and because I truly thought this was temporary. By the time a year had passed, they owed me somewhere around $19,000. I had a rough number in my head, but I hadn't written it all down carefully because I kept telling myself it was almost over. They'd pay me back soon. I didn't want to make it into a thing by tracking it formally like some kind of creditor. That was my mistake. That was one of my mistakes. The second mistake was what happened at Thanksgiving. We were all at my house. My son, Nadia, my daughter, who lives in Columbus, and her husband and their 2 kids. After dinner, when the kids were in the other room watching a movie and my daughter had gone upstairs to call a friend, Nadia asked if she could talk to me about something. Just the two of us. My son had conveniently gone out to the garage to help my son-in-law with something. Nadia sat across from me at the dining room table with her hands folded and her voice soft, and said that she and my son were really struggling financially, that they'd made some choices early in their marriage, the bigger house, the cars, that seemed manageable at the time but had become a strain. She said she hated asking. She knew I'd already helped so much. But would I consider adding her as an authorized user on one of my credit cards? Just for emergencies, just as a safety net. She'd be so careful with it. She looked at me with those big, earnest eyes and she said, "You're the only person I feel safe enough to ask. You're more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was." I said I would think about it. I did think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it for about 3 days. And then I said yes. I added her as an authorized user on my Visa card, a card I'd had for 20 years and used for ordinary purchases, groceries, gas, the occasional online order. The credit limit was $12,000. I told her it was only for true emergencies. I told her to let me know whenever she used it. She hugged me. She said she would never abuse my trust. For about 6 weeks, nothing happened. No charges appeared that I didn't recognize. I started to think maybe I'd been too worried. Maybe they really would be responsible about it. Then in January, I sat down to review my statement, and I saw a charge for $340 at a restaurant I'd never heard of. Then a charge for $189 at a spa. Then six 2012s at a home goods store. Then $890 at a clothing boutique. All within a single 2-week period. None of it was an emergency. I called my son that evening. I told him what I'd seen. There was a long pause, and then he said Nadia had needed some things and she'd meant to tell me, and he was sure she'd pay me back, and he was sorry. He'd talked to her. He sounded embarrassed but not alarmed. Like this was a small misunderstanding, like I was perhaps being slightly unreasonable for bringing it up. I did not remove her from the card that night. I can't explain that now except to say that I was still telling myself this was fixable, that surely they understood, that things would change. I called Nadia directly the next day. She apologized. She said she'd been stressed and had made some poor decisions. She cried, actually, or something that sounded like crying. She said she would pay me back for every single charge. She did not pay me back for a single charge. She did not pay me back for a single charge. Over the next several months, the spending continued. It was never dramatic enough to feel like an emergency. It wasn't like she went and bought a television or took a vacation all at once. It was a steady drip. $100 here, $200 here. A charge at a grocery store for $340. My son and Nadia's grocery store, not mine. A charge at a salon. A charge at a furniture consignment shop in their neighborhood. I kept watching it happen, and I kept telling myself I was about to say something, I was about to put a stop to it. And then, in March, I got a call from my bank about unusual activity. Not on the credit card, on my checking account. Someone had made 3 ACH transfers over the course of 8 days, one northern $12,1200 to what in line session $500, totaling $3,500. The bank had flagged them because they were to an account they hadn't seen before. I sat very still on the phone with that banker for a moment before I asked her to read me the account number the transfers went to. I didn't recognize it, but when I did some digging, when I called my son and asked him point blank, he admitted, after a long and painful silence, that it was Nadia's personal checking account. She had somehow obtained my routing number and account number. He said he hadn't known about it. He said he was horrified. He sounded it. But he also, when I asked him what we were going to do about it, started talking about how much pressure they'd been under, how Nadia was struggling, how he was trying to hold everything together. He did not say, "I'll make sure you're repaid immediately." He did not say, "I'm going to the police." He said, "Mom, can you just give us a little time to sort this out?" I said I would call him back. I did not call him back. Instead, I called my bank and filed a fraud report. Then I called my own lawyer. I've had the same attorney for 15 years, a woman who handled my husband's estate and who I trust completely. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and then she said, Audrey, I need you to gather every record you have. Every transfer, every credit card statement, every text message or email where you discussed money with either of them. Bring it all to me. I spent the next 3 evenings at the kitchen table. That same table, going through everything. I pulled statements going back almost 2 years. I printed every text thread. I had a shoebox of notes I'd kept. Little scribbled reminders to myself. When I added it all up carefully, methodically, the way I had once managed a medical practice's finances, the total was $47,200. $47,200. I sat with that number for a long time. The next Sunday, my son called me for our usual chat. He sounded normal, cheerful even. He asked how I was, told me about a project at work, mentioned that Nadia was thinking about switching jobs. He did not bring up the money. He did not bring up any of it. I let him talk. I said, in the right places. And I felt something shift inside me, some last remaining piece of hope. Go quiet. 2 days later, I met with my attorney. She had already spoken with the bank's fraud department. Because Nadia had obtained my account information without authorization and made transfers without my consent, there was a clear case for civil fraud and potentially criminal charges. The credit card charges were more complicated since I had added her as an authorized user, but the ACH transfers were unambiguous. My attorney sent a formal demand letter to both my son and Nadia that week. Registered mail, return receipt requested. The letter outlined the total amount owed and gave them 30 days to respond with a repayment plan before we moved forward with legal action. I also, that same week, removed Nadia from my credit card, changed the password on my online banking, set up two-factor authentication on every financial account I had, and moved the bulk of my savings into a new account at a different bank entirely, one they'd never had any information about. Then I waited. Nadia called me 4 days after the letter arrived. She was not crying this time. She was furious. She said I had humiliated her. She said I had gone behind her family's back. She said that a mother, a real mother, would never do this to her children. She said I was destroying my relationship with my son over money. I let her finish. And then I said, very calmly, Nadia, I need you to understand something. You took $47,000 from me without permission. Not borrowed. Took. And the only thing I'm interested in discussing now is how it's going to be repaid. She hung up. My son called 20 minutes later. He was not furious. He was something worse. He was wounded. He told me I didn't understand how hard things had been. He told me Nadia hadn't meant for it to go this far. He said, Mom, this is going to tear our family apart. His voice broke on that last sentence, and I had to close my eyes for a moment because whatever else had happened, he was still my son. And I loved him, and that doesn't just stop. But I had sat at that kitchen table and added up $47,200, and love wasn't going to subtract a single dollar of it. I told him that I wasn't trying to tear anything apart. I told him that what I was trying to do was be repaid money that had been taken from me without my consent. I told him that if he and Nadia put together a reasonable repayment plan and worked with my attorney, I would not pursue the criminal fraud route. But I was not going to pretend nothing had happened. I was 67 years old. That money was supposed to take care of me for the rest of my life. He said he needed time to think. I said I understood. I told him I loved him. And then I sat in that quiet house for a long time after we hung up, looking at the October light coming through the window, and I cried. Not because I was defeated, because I wasn't, and that was its own kind of grief. My attorney and their attorney reached an agreement 5 weeks later. My son and Nadia would repay the full $47,200 in structured monthly payments over 4 years. They signed a legal agreement. The first payment came on the 1st of December, direct deposit, $9081.66, and I watched it arrive in my account and felt something I still don't quite have a word for. Not triumph, not relief, exactly. Something quieter. Nadia and I have not spoken since that phone call. My son and I talk occasionally. It is not what it was. I don't know if it will ever be what it was. That's the part the legal agreement couldn't fix. You can get a judge to sign a repayment schedule, but you cannot sign back the easy Sunday phone calls, the comfortable dinners, the version of your son you thought you knew. What I can tell you is this: I sleep now. That sounds like a small thing, but it is not a small thing. For nearly 2 years, I had carried a low-grade anxiety that I had learned to ignore, a background noise of unease about my money, my future, my son, all of it tangled together. That noise is gone. The account at the new bank is untouched. The savings are rebuilding, slowly, one payment at a time. I still sit at my kitchen table in the mornings. I still let my coffee go lukewarm sometimes. I still write down numbers on a notepad, and I know what every one of them means. If you are in a situation even a little bit like this one, if someone you love is asking you for money you are not entirely sure you should give, if there is a voice somewhere in the back of your mind that keeps saying something isn't right, please listen to that voice. I am not telling you not to be generous. I am generous, I always have been. But generosity has to be a choice you make with your eyes open, not a door you leave unlocked and hope no one walks through. I hope my story was helpful to you today. If it was, please like this video so that others can find it. And drop a comment. I'd love to know what city you're watching from and what you would have done if you'd been in my place. I'll see you in the next story. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any mystical sense, just in the plain, honest way that life actually works. Every choice has a weight to it. Every time you let something slide, that weight gets added to the pile. And at some point, the pile tips. Nadia didn't take $47,000 from me all at once. That's the thing people don't understand when they hear a number like that. It happened in increments small enough that each one, individually, felt manageable. 100 here, a few hundred there, a story that made sense, a face that looked sorry. And I kept absorbing each increment, telling myself this was the last one, telling myself it was almost over. That wasn't generosity. That was me choosing comfort, the comfort of not having a hard conversation, over honesty. And that choice cost me, literally and in every other way. Daniel didn't become the son who stood in my kitchen defending a woman who had stolen from his own mother overnight either. That happened in increments too. Small surrenders, small silences, small choices to keep the peace with her at the expense of everything else. By the time I needed him to stand up, he had spent years practicing the opposite. What I had to reckon with, and this was the hardest part, harder than the legal process, harder than the money, was my own role in it. Not because I deserved what happened. I didn't. But I had seen the signs early. I had felt that low-grade unease from the very beginning, and I had taught myself out of listening to it, over and over again, because acting on it would have required courage I wasn't ready to use. Wisdom isn't just knowing what's right. It's being willing to do what's right when doing it costs something. The morning I finally called my attorney, I was scared. I want to be honest about that. I was 67 years old, and I was scared of my own son's reaction, scared of being seen as the difficult mother-in-law, scared of what it would mean for our relationship if I stopped pretending. But I picked up the phone anyway, and I think that was the most important thing I've ever done. Not because of the money I recovered, but because of what it meant to finally act in accordance with what I actually knew to be true. There's something that happens when you stop lying to yourself. The noise quiets. The anxiety that you've learned to carry around like it's a normal part of being alive. It lifts. I didn't realize how much energy I had been spending on pretending until I stopped. I don't know what will happen with my son. I hope someday he finds his way back to the person I raised. But I can't hold my own life hostage to that hope. What I can do is take care of myself with the same diligence and self-respect that I took care of my finances for 31 years. What I can do is make sure that the next chapter of my life, whatever's left of it, is built on truth. If you're sitting somewhere right now recognizing pieces of your own life in mine, please hear this. It is not too late to stop. It is not too late to make the call, change the account, talk to the attorney. The hardest step and the right step are usually the same step, and you are stronger than the story you've been telling yourself about why you can't take it.